It was just another quiet Saturday morning, the kind where you hope to get the yard work done and maybe relax with a cold drink after. I was in the middle of mowing my lawn when I saw our infamous HOA Karen, marching straight toward me with that look on her face. You know the one. She didn't even bother with a hello before demanding I hand over my lawnmower because hers had apparently broken down. Now, I've had enough run-ins with her to know that once you give an inch, she'll take the whole yard. So I politely said no. That's when things went from awkward to absolutely insane. She started yelling, accusing me of being a selfish neighbor, claiming I was violating community spirit or whatever that means. I kept calm, thinking she'd eventually walk away. But nope. Instead, she pulled out her phone and actually dialed 911. Yes, over a lawnmower . I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Was this really happening? The next thing I knew, I was standing there, stunned, while she gave the dispatcher some wildly exaggerated version of events. And just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, the cops actually showed up. What happened next? Let's just say, things spiraled in a way no one saw coming. So there I was, standing in my own front yard, watching a police cruiser slowly roll up the street like it was a crime scene. The neighbors had started peeking through their windows, some even stepping outside pretending to check their mail. HOA Karen was already waving her arms like she was directing traffic, trying to explain her emergency to the officers before they even got out of the car. I just stood there, stunned, still holding the mower handle like it was some kind of weapon. One of the officers approached me calmly, asking what was going on. I told him the truth, that she wanted to borrow my mower. I said no, and somehow that turned into a 911 call. The officer gave me this look like, seriously. Meanwhile, Karen was still going off in the background, talking about how I was refusing to cooperate with the HOA, and how she felt threatened by my attitude. Threatened? I hadn't even raised my voice. At that point, I started wondering if she really believed her own story, or if she was just trying to stir up trouble like she always did. See, this wasn't the first time Karen had caused a scene. Last month, she left nasty notes on my neighbor's door about their Halloween decorations. She thrives on drama. But calling the police over a lawnmower, this was next level. As the officer tried to calm things down, Karen kept pushing her version of the story like it was some high-stakes neighborhood scandal. She was pointing at my mower like it was a stolen car, ranting about HOA rules and community responsibilities. The officer glanced at me, clearly trying not to roll his eyes, and asked if I was part of the HOA. I told him yeah, I pay my dues, follow the actual rules, and just want to mow my lawn in peace without being dragged into drama. But Karen wasn't done. She pulled out a printed HOA guideline booklet, no joke, and started flipping through it, trying to find some random clause that would force me to share personal property. Meanwhile, a small crowd had formed. My neighbor Joe from 2 doors down strolled over, pretending to water his plants, but it was obvious he was listening in. Then Susan from across the street joined him, whispering something like, "She's doing it again, huh?" Turns out, Karen had tried this before, trying to guilt neighbors into handing over their tools, even scolding a teenager for using a leaf blower too early on a Sunday. I wasn't the first target, just the latest. But then something weird happened. One of the other neighbors, an older guy named Mr. Patel, walked up and quietly told the officer he had doorbell camera footage of the whole thing. He said Karen had marched onto my property first, uninvited, and started the confrontation. That seemed to change the mood a little. The officer asked Karen to step aside and speak privately while another officer stayed with me. I could feel a shift, like things were starting to unravel for her, but not in any obvious way. She wasn't backing down. In fact, she looked more determined than ever. The tension was thick now. The lawnmower sat in the middle of the yard like the centerpiece of some ridiculous suburban showdown. I hadn't even finished the backyard yet. I could tell this wasn't just about a mower anymore. For Karen, it had turned into something bigger: control, reputation, whatever power she thought the HOA gave her. And I had just drawn a line she didn't expect anyone to draw. That's when she pointed at Mr. Patel and said something under her breath, something that made him shake his head and walk away. I couldn't hear it, but I could tell it hit a nerve. Suddenly, this wasn't just about me. It was about how far she was willing to go, and who else had been silently dealing with her for way too long. That's when she pointed at Mr. Patel and said something under her breath, something that made him shake his head and walk away. I couldn't hear it, but I could tell it hit a nerve. Suddenly, this wasn't just about me. It was about how far she was willing to go, and who else had been silently dealing with her for way too long. And right then, one of the officers got a call on his radio, looked at Karen and said, "Ma'am, we need to talk over here, now." The officer who called Karen over disappeared behind a hedge, leaving me standing there with the other cop, who kept glancing between Karen and me, like this whole thing was a bad sitcom. Karen's face had shifted, no more the angry, demanding neighbor. Now there was a flicker of something else. Nervousness? Frustration? I couldn't tell. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The crowd was still watching, whispering, waiting. Joe nudged Susan, whispering about how wild this had gotten. Everyone knew Karen's reputation, but this was next level. Calling 911 over a lawnmower wasn't just petty, it was crazy. And now the cops were clearly taking her seriously enough to pull her aside for questioning. What could she possibly say to justify all this? Suddenly, Karen came back into view. Her voice was quieter, but sharper. She muttered something about protecting the neighborhood and setting an example, but there was a strange edge to it, like she was trying to convince herself more than anyone else. The officer beside me gave me a look like, "You sure you want to get into this with her?" I just shook my head, trying to stay calm, but inside I was on edge. This wasn't just a neighborly disagreement anymore. It felt like a battle line had been drawn. Then Mr. Purtle stepped forward again, holding up his phone. "This might help clear things up," he said softly, showing the video. Everyone leaned in, the screen glowing in the daylight. On the video, Karen was clearly seen stepping onto my property without asking, waving her phone around, and raising her voice first. That moment made a few people gasp. Karen's expression darkened. She stared at the screen, then at the officers. I could almost hear her thinking, asterisk, "How much am I willing to lose here?" asterisk. The officers exchanged glances, then one pulled out a notepad, starting to write something down. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. The tension reached a boiling point, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Was this enough to finally put an end to her drama? Or was this just the beginning of an even bigger neighborhood showdown? The air was electric with anticipation, but no one knew what the next move would be, and honestly, neither did I. Just when it seemed like the video evidence might finally turn the tide, Karen surprised everyone. She took a deep breath, then dropped something that no one saw coming. "You all don't know the whole story," she said, voice steady but cold. "There's more to this than a simple lawn-mower dispute." Everyone's heads turned toward her, the murmurs growing louder. The officers exchanged puzzled glances, clearly caught off guard. Karen started to talk about past incidents, claims that I had ignored HOA maintenance requests, that I was somehow responsible for damage to common areas, and that neighbors had been complaining quietly for months. She painted a picture of me as a troublemaker who refused to cooperate, someone who was causing more problems than just this mower situation. It was like she was trying to flip the narrative completely, making me the bad neighbor. I felt the eyes of the crowd shift, some nodding, others frowning, confused by this sudden twist. Mr. Patel, who had just shared the camera footage, frowned too, clearly skeptical but unsure what to say. The officers took notes, now juggling this new claim along with the original complaint. It was turning into more than just a petty neighbor feud. It was becoming a full-blown HOA conflict with accusations flying back and forth. As Karen spoke, I realized this wasn't just about borrowing a lawnmower anymore. It was about control, power, and old grudges bubbling to the surface. The whole neighborhood was watching, waiting to see if this explosive reveal would shift the balance. But with both sides now accusing each other, the tension was higher than ever, and the stakes couldn't be clearer. The question was, who would the officers believe, and what would come next when the dust finally settled? The officers listened patiently as Karen laid out her accusations, but something in their expressions told me they weren't buying the full story. One of them glanced back at the phone with the camera footage again, then asked Karen to explain why she had stormed onto my property without permission in the first place. Her confident tone wavered, and suddenly the story didn't sound as certain as before. After a few more pointed questions, Karen's facade cracked. She admitted she'd been frustrated with me over small neighborhood disagreements for months, but calling 911 over a lawnmower was an overreaction, even for her. The officers exchanged looks, then gently reminded her that the police aren't the right people to settle HOA disputes or personal disagreements over lawn equipment. They warned her about misusing emergency services and the consequences it could bring. At that moment, the tension in the crowd began to ease. The officers explained to both of us that the real solution was to bring these issues to the HOA board and to try resolving things through proper channels, not with police involvement. Karen reluctantly agreed, and the officers left with a clear message that any future calls like this could have legal repercussions. Just when it felt like the story was wrapping up, Mr. Patel stepped forward, holding his phone again. "There's one more thing," he said quietly, showing a different video clip, one taken weeks earlier. It wasn't just Karen acting out. It showed another neighbor secretly trying to sabotage my lawn mower, hoping to cause trouble between us. The crowd gasped, and all eyes turned toward the quiet corner where the neighbor was standing awkwardly. Suddenly, what seemed like a simple lawnmower dispute was just the surface of deeper tensions lurking beneath the neighborhood's calm facade. The story wasn't over, far from it. After the unexpected reveal, the neighborhood was buzzing more than ever. It turned out that the lawnmower dispute was just the tip of a much bigger problem. Underlying tensions and misunderstandings had been building for months. The neighbor caught on camera trying to sabotage the mower finally admitted to feeling frustrated with all the drama, but hadn't meant for things to spiral out of control. That moment shifted the whole atmosphere, reminding everyone how small actions can blow up when communication breaks down. The HOA board quickly stepped in, organizing a meeting to clear the air and set some new guidelines on how neighbors should handle disagreements without escalating to the police. Karen agreed to apologize for her overreaction, and I made it clear I was always willing to help, just not at the expense of respect or common sense. The whole neighborhood seemed relieved, like a weight had lifted. What I learned from this crazy situation is that even the smallest things, like lending a lawn mower, can become huge conflicts when people stop listening to each other. It's a reminder to keep patience, set boundaries, and communicate clearly before misunderstandings get out of hand. So next time your HOA drama heats up, remember, staying calm and respectful can save a lot of headaches, and maybe even keep the cops out of your yard.